City Council work session. Today's topic is transportation and general capital maintenance. We have Michael Moore here from Transportation, Billy Jackson from Engineering Services, and Mary Voog from Budget and Management Services. I will let Mary step up and we will get to it.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. I am Mary Viggy with Budget and Management Services. I just wanted to tee up today's conversation with a little bit of background about what we're going to talk about today. As a reminder, back in March, there were questions that came up about general transportation maintenance as far as resurfacing, sidewalks, bridges, and those areas. And so staff is here today, Michael Moore, to present on that. We also included in that presentation an overview of our general facility maintenance. And so Billy Jackson will be presenting on those identified needs. And so just as a reminder, these are capital maintenance that are normally found in our capital improvement program. Our second presentation today is a follow-up to our budget work session in February. Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources will be presenting on the follow-up questions associated with the capital maintenance, including what staffing would be needed if a penny or 2 penny were implemented, and a follow-up on the bond discussion from Council Retreat with 3 additional scenarios. And so I'm going to turn it over to Michael Moore to kick us off today to talk about transportation maintenance.
Good afternoon, mayors and member of council. Again, I'm Michael Moore with Transportation. So as Mary mentioned, today we're going to walk through the capital maintenance funding for transportation and also for general facilities maintenance. For transportation, those buckets generally fall into 3 main categories, kind of our pavement assets, our bike and pedestrian assets, basically our bike paths, side paths, and sidewalks, and then our bridges and culverts. Anything over a particular size of a culvert gets classified as bridge. So we're going to talk through those a little bit today. Just as a concept in general, though, I want to talk a little bit about not projects that are deferred, but kind of how we're funding the projects themselves, and in this case, underfunding the programs at a point where we're not keeping up with the levels of deterioration and expansion that we're seeing in the program. The other point I'd like to start with today is that other than the penny that we have for street resurfacing that equates to about $6.3 million, there is no dedicated funding source for these other maintenance needs. We do fund these regularly out of the capital budget, but they compete in sort of that competitive prioritization process as other projects kind of do. We do fund those out of those one-time sources like the general fund or 2/3 bonds. So I want to start today with kind of our capital maintenance program. Many of you recall that we've had a couple items before you previously to discuss a new approach that we're taking, more of an asset management-based approach to the street pavements that we've got. That included hiring consultants to do basically not only to implement sort of a pavement management software and an asset management software, but also to do a real comprehensive overall kind of assessment of where our streets kind of exist today and in terms of their condition. So we drove every mile of city street to get that assessment, and we've got a really good baseline to start, and we're going to continue that process over the next few years so we can start to develop kind of how degradation models kind of work, how the streets are physically deteriorating, or some deteriorating on curves faster than others. And that's going to become kind of the basis for where we're going to do more of a preservation approach and wed that with our street resurfacing to make sure that we've got kind of a long-term program that helps address and maintain our streets in good or better condition. We're going to sort of start from like least intensive maintenance to most intensive maintenance here. So I want to start with that pavement preservation. We had not done a lot of that here prior to 2 or 3 years ago, and we've started to do more work with things like pavement rejuvenator, which is basically a treatment that helps revitalize the esters in asphalt and make the pavement last longer. Things like crack sealing, which we'd never done much of previously. Some slurry seals that we've had a difficult time getting good competitive bids back. and then a few other items that we can do in that same line, like patching, to do more kind of extensive patching to keep the pavement in good repair. I want to share here this deterioration chart. Even though this is really more related to the resurfacing aspect of the program, the concepts are exactly the same here, where if you can expend some dollars on maintenance and that sort of pavement preservation, sort of like painting your house. If you've got a house that's got wood siding on it, if you keep it regularly painted, the siding lasts much, much longer before it has to be replaced. Same thing here. If we can do some preservation on the on pavements ahead of time, it'll help us and save us money in the long term. And you can see the kind of level of investment, 4 to 5 times on that sort of curvature of deterioration. So as we're working today, we're pulling some of that money out of some of the resurfacing contracts and some of our other programs. But really, this program, to be funded at the level it needs to be, should be funded at about an additional $1.65 million. So here we'll move to resurfacing. And right now, the city is setting on a goal of 85 on a scale of 100 to where our streets, we want our streets to be maintained. You can see at the rate that we're investing in the streets at $6.3 million a year, we're going to see a slow deterioration of about 8 points over time. So that 85 goal that we have there, we're at an 81 after this past year, and we'll again continue to see that kind of curve. And I do want to point out that even though this looks relatively flat, if we were to project this line out, you'll start to see that arc bend more quickly and deterioration come faster. So right now we're funding that at $6.3 million a year. To continue to meet that 85 goal that we're trying to get to, that would take another $2.75 million. The last item I've got in this in the payment systems is something that we are not doing at all today. So many of you are probably familiar, and you've heard this in your districts about some of the streets that are in really bad condition. I'll use an example. There's a stub of Fairview near the Wade Avenue interchange with Capitol Boulevard. It is in really bad condition. It has immense potholes, and it's sort of beyond even a rehabilitation, beyond a resurfacing, if you will. There is a process called full depth reclamation. It's sort of an in-place recycling of the asphalt and of the subbase that you put back down with some other additives, cement, some binders, et cetera, and you basically put that back down and then resurface it again. We do none of that, but we do have a number of streets that would benefit from that. If we had an additional funding level of about $2.85 million, we could begin a program and start to address some of the worst streets that we've got in our system. Another thing that we are sort of borrowing from little pots of money here and there to kind of do today is maintenance on our bike side paths. We have a number of bike side paths, 21 miles of which are there. We have several of those that are close to 25 or 30 years old now and are pretty poor condition. This is something, if we had money, about $300,000 a year on an annual basis, that's something we could begin to address systematically and keep those side paths and some of the bike lanes in better shape than they are today. And then we'll talk about sidewalks. So currently we need about another $1.9 million for this to kind of keep those pieces in good or better shape. Like we did with pavements, you'll also recall we had a contract before you earlier this year to do a citywide assessment of all our sidewalks and all of our curb ramps. That is in underway right now. We have the vendors are out actually with something that looks like a Segway, writing all of our sidewalks, taking data from terms of slopes, condition, cracking, things like that, offsets, and they're taking all of that and they're going to put that in that same asset management software that we had. They're also looking at our ADA curb ramps. This is really important work in that it's some of our most basic infrastructure, and that ADA assessment and projections on what we need to invest in that becomes the basis of a more robust ADA transition plan that we need. to make sure that we're meeting federal standards and guidelines. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about bridge repair and maintenance. So we are funding this today. Again, it competes with the programs throughout the city. The bridge maintenance and preservation piece here is something that you probably don't see much of. A lot of this happens underneath the bridge, on top of the bridge. There's treatments that we do to help keep water out of the bridge decks. There's painting that happens underneath to coat bridge steel to keep it from rusting away. Again, very important work. We are required biannually by the federal government to do bridge inspections to make sure that all of our bridges meet certain safety standards. And that becomes the basis for this maintenance plans that we're talking about today. They also become the basis for our bridge replacement program. This includes some major maintenance. You remember we did hydrodemolition to remove the deck and upper surfaces on Lassiter Mill through the summer and just have completed that work. But those kinds of projects would fall into this category as well. And we need that funding of about $1.5 million a year to do 1 to 3 major bridges in that terms of, well, major bridge repairs or replacements every year. So to kind of sum it all up, this is a little bit of we are doing, again, some of this now. Some of this is new money. Some of this is additional money. But if we were to total it all up and to say if we had a dedicated funding source on top of what we have in the penny for preservation, we'd need another $12 million on an annual basis to make sure that we're keeping all of our assets in the best repair and the safest repair possible. So I can take questions now if you would like, or if you would prefer to go through the whole thing, I'm happy to turn this over, the podium over to Billy Jackson, Assistant Director with Engineering Services, and we can come back at the end.
Does anybody have any questions for Michael? Okay, Michael, we'll continue, and then we'll see who has questions at the end.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. I'm Billy Jackson, Engineering Services. Today I want to talk to you about general maintenance needs. Okay, here we go. Thank you. So today what we're going to look at is 5 categories of maintenance-related projects associated with our general government and public safety facilities. We'll be taking a look at these categories in detail. Our staff have identified $24.5 million worth of maintenance-related needs over the next 12 years. It requires us to fund $2 million annually to cover these needs. What this program does not include are things such as facilities associated with the civic campus. We did not include those at all because there's a lot of questions about what's going to happen, so we didn't want to address anything associated with civic campus facilities. We also didn't look at enhancements. These are strictly maintenance-related projects that are existing systems that are we have to replace to keep our facilities up to speed. We also did not look at sustainable solutions, again, focusing only on existing maintenance-related needs, and we also didn't look at our enterprise facilities. So starting out with building system improvements, the way we analyze and look at building system improvements is that engineering services has 2 divisions, integrated facility services and facility operations, that do annual assessments on their facility systems. And they go out and look at life cycle of the equipment. They look at efficiency. They look at compliance-related needs and energy efficiency and failures. And as they look at these, they compile a list of needs associated with all of our systems throughout the city. They also take a look at any opportunity to improve efficiency. But again, as I stated in the very beginning, we didn't look at sustainable initiatives, really only replacement of existing systems. So as they compile this list and looking at all the city facilities in this particular general public improvements line item, there's a $700,000 need of funding annually. When it comes to roof repairs and replacements, what staff does is they interact with consulting firms, and they come out and they analyze our facilities, and they look at our roofs. They look for integrity, reoccurring historic problems. They They look for leak mitigation and trying to stop mold and mildew. So as we deal with our day-to-day maintenance and we work through our preventive maintenance programs, all that information is compiled along with this consultant report, and they put together a roof replacement program. Also, as part of that program, as we replace roofs, we incorporate safety standards like fall protection in. So as we do roof replacements, that is incorporated into the project. We've identified a $200,000 annual need in this program. Life safety and security and compliance. These are more of our system type related maintenance needs, such as automation and controlled access control, video surveillance, things of that nature. Fire systems, underground storage tanks are all things that we look at under this category. And as I said in the very beginning, we didn't look at our parking decks as they're related to an enterprise facility. So we do analyze and keep details on that program. We work with our transportation department to put together the program, but it's not included in this funding strategy. There's an identified $300,000 annual need identified in this program. And facility upgrades. Facility upgrades are things such as some of our cosmetic things like our painting, our flooring, small lighting projects. We also look at ADA compliance based off our ADA transition plan, and we look at envelope needs. So for facility upgrades, we start compiling all that, and there's an identified $600,000 a year need to support this program. Lighting system modernization. What lighting system modernization is when we do whole system changeouts, both big internal systems or external systems such as roadway or parking lot. Now, this is not the highway lighting system. It's mainly lights within our own city properties and everything. We also look for ways to take advantage of any new technologies and to save energy and things like that. And there's an identified $200,000 annual need in this program. So to sum it up, for general public improvements, the Facility and Operations and Integrated Facility Services Division have identified a $2 million annual need over a 12-year period to keep our existing facilities and our systems running at a good quality level. Thank you. Yeah, Michael's here and I'm here too if there's any questions. I will say that on the projects that I talk about, these are identified projects by specific system and specific location. So these are not possible projects. These are actual projects that have been identified across our facility. So with that, if there's questions from me or Michael, we'll welcome any you've got.
I think, wait a minute, Councilmember Branch has a question.
Yes. So when I heard the transportation piece, it was identified as 12 million in addition that's needed. The 2 million for the capital maintenance, is that in addition to what you currently have, or is that is that annually needed as in addition?
Yes, sir. That is an additional need in what we already have.
Okay.
And it is an annual $2 million need.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Councilmember Knight?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is actually for Mary. Maybe a broader question. The pieces in number 12, panel 12, I counted 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the general facility maintenance. What percentage currently, a ballpark figure of the overall city budget, do those make up currently? Does that make sense? So basically, the transportation. These pieces. You mean
the capital program or the operating?
Well, these would fall under capital, right?
Yes, I mean, these are a small percentage of that capital budget, but if the general fund, so these are typically maintenance projects like these have been historically funded through general fund contribution, sometimes
right.
2/3, and that represents only about 10 or 12 million, or 10 or 12%, I'm sorry, not million, 10 or 12% of the overall CIP. So while this appears to be small dollars, it is a large percentage in comparison to what the general fund currently contributes. I don't know if that makes sense or answers your question.
It does. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Okay. Next.
Good afternoon, Mayor Baldwin, members of City Council. Oscar Carmona with Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources. This afternoon, I'll be providing you a capital maintenance and parks bond update. Today, I'm going to cover feedback received from your retreat last month, an outline of the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources capital maintenance backlog, and provide you some updated park bond scenarios. Feedback, this is a feedback that staff documented during the March City Council retreat and includes maintaining equity as a priority, including Phase 2 of John Chavis Memorial Park, South Park Heritage Walk, and Top Green improvements in all scenarios. In addition, Lake Wheeler Road being included in all scenarios, and funding for Dix Park Plaza and Play in all scenarios, assuming the Dix Park Conservancy match of $20 million. In addition, we were also asked to consider Devereaux Meadows, Tarboro Road into scenario options, as well as Greenway connectivity options. And we were finally directed to bring 3 updated park bond scenarios in the ranges of $150 million, $175 million, and $200 million. We also heard from council during the retreat was to explore other funding options for capital maintenance. Staff from Budget Management Services, Finance, Parks, Recreation and Cultural Resources, and Engineering Services has worked together on the next few slides. PRCR and Engineering Services continuously document capital maintenance needs. We have determined that we would need approximately $10 to $15 million annually to maintain our parks, greenways, and facilities. Our overall current backlog is between $150 million and $175 million. Currently, we are not staffed to take on this amount of work, and this is based on replacement and improvement on exact scheduling. The needs calculations for the capital budget is based on several factors, which include current asset inventories, best practice life cycle timelines and costs, in addition to studies and assessments. So our capital maintenance needs categories include the following: greenways, parkside improvements, aquatics, facility upgrades and roofing, building systems and security, and electrical infrastructure and lighting. Staff has discussed the level of staffing that would be needed to implement $15 million a year of capital maintenance. And this includes staff in both Parks and Engineering Services and may include such positions as engineers, administrative personnel, and compliance and inspector positions. The annual operating impact for these 8 full-time staff is approximately $800,000 a year. And this does not take into consideration additional staffing needs related to future park bond referendums. We also want to be conscious about our limitations on our ability to implement the $15 million annually in capital maintenance. And we have listed a few of them here. And some of these may include the procurement process, standing up the new capital maintenance program, hiring and capacity building for new staff, and then also impacts on existing programs and services. The current tax rate is 0.3552. And if we're calculated using the FY21 total property valuation, which is a median home value of $255,811, 1 penny will yield $7.6 million, and 2 pennies will bring in $15.3 million. The bottom chart shows the new annual tax rate and the amount of increase from the current tax rate. So 1 penny will increase the tax anywhere from $15 for a $150,000 home up to $50 for a $500,000 home. 2 pennies will increase tax anywhere from $30 for the $150,000 home up to $100 for a $500,000 home. Once again, just a quick reminder of the feedback that you shared at the retreat, which includes focusing on equity, including Chavis Park Phase 2, South Park Heritage Walk, Top Green, Dix Park Plaza and Play, and Lake Wheeler Road in all scenarios. In addition, include Devereaux Meadows and Tarboro Road in some scenarios, have a focus on greenway connectivity, and then also bring back updated park bond scenarios in the ranges between 150, 175, and 200 million, in addition to exploring other options to fund capital maintenance. So now I'm going to move on to some updated park bond scenarios. The scenarios I'm going to present assume that 1 or 2 cents per maintenance is considered. Staff removed approximately $22 million in capital maintenance from the following bond scenarios. The reinvestment projects that remain in the scenarios are new park amenities being developed in existing parks. We also focused on selecting projects which would minimize long-term operating impacts. One example that I would like to share with you about that we would go ahead and keep items on here, for example, is a lighting replacement at Walnut Creek Athletic Complex, which is a $4 million project. So higher cost capital maintenance items, such as the Walnut Creek Athletic Complex lighting, would remain just due to their overall higher cost. So as we move on, every scenario includes $33 million for Dix Park Plaza and Play to match the $20 million commitment from the Conservancy. Those amounts will total $53 million, which is the current estimate for Plaza and Play. All scenarios are also going to include Phase 2 of Chavis, South Park Heritage Walk, improvements to Top Green, improvements to Lake Wheeler Road, and Biltmore Hills Tennis Center expansion. Scenario 1 includes a master plan and Phase 1 development of Kyle Drive Park, a new park in Northeast Raleigh. Implement the Lotta House master plan, improvements to Leesville Road, Cedars Hill, and North Hills Park. And Scenario 1 totals $150.9 million. As we look at the Scenario 1 map, I do want to show you that the distribution of Scenario 1 projects in the city, the larger the circle, the higher the investment. And as we move on to Scenario 2 is at $184.7 million. Once again, it keeps all those themes I earlier talked about, but this also adds the following projects: renovations to Method Road Park, construction funds for Devereaux Meadows, and renovations and expansion of the Sertoma Arts Center. And as we look at the map for Scenario 2, the larger the circle, the higher the investment. And finally, scenario 3, which is at $205.3 million. The difference in this scenario from 2 is that it includes renovations at Method Road, that instead of renovations to Method Road, we're putting in Tarboro Road Park improvements instead, which comes in at a much higher cost. Scenario 3's distribution map, the larger the circle, the higher the investment. As far as the tax rate and homeowner impact of these bond scenarios, the data on this table was developed in conjunction with budget management services and finance departments. It is once again based off the median home value in Raleigh, which is $255,811 as of January 1st, 2020. The total anticipated tax impact for a median value home can range anywhere from 2.08 cents for scenario 1 up to 3.24 cents for scenario 3, resulting in an annual estimated impact of $53.21 up to $82.83. These impacts will, of course, be either lower or higher based on the actual home value. That concludes my presentation. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Councilmember Buffkin.
Thank you, Mayor, and Oscar, thank you for your presentation. This was really helpful. Can you help me understand I believe it was 22 million that was taken out of the bond under the assumption that we had a 1 or 2 penny tax increase? And I'll just say for context, I'm a little surprised that the number wasn't bigger because I was thinking, 12 to $15 million a year from a 2 penny tax increase over a 5-year bond would be more like 50 million pulled out of the bond. So if I got that number right, could you give me a little context and help me understand how you all moved the money in these new bond scenarios with the assumption that we had the tax increase available?
Yes, sir. Let me invite up Stephen Bentley, Assistant Director with PRCR. He'll be more than happy to answer that question for you specifically.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The projects that we removed were annual capital maintenance. So if you think of paving, signage, markings, replenishing fence or ball fields, that was pulled out. What we left in were some major projects. Oscar utilized the example of Walnut Creek lighting. That's a $4 million project. So we assume that's best used for a bond project versus an annual capital maintenance. There's a few others in there. So approximately 22 million we considered annual capital maintenance were pulled out. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. So, and if I may, Mayor, just a brief follow-up. So do you have a threshold in mind? In my mind, the number's probably around $1 million, somewhere in the million or 2 million range, where that sort of moves you more toward a bond funding model than, and is that basically correct?
Yeah, it's a combination. It's a great question. So we considered projects over $1 million, in some instances over $1.5 million to $2 million, to be more appropriate in a bond. But we also determined that projects that we're just repairing, that belongs in our annual program. So we have a few projects where we're actually building smaller amenities that are around the $1 million threshold in a park, and we feel like bonds should build new and that the annual capital should repair existing. So it's a combination of dollar threshold and whether it's new or a repair.
Do we have any other questions? Councilmember Knight?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Oscar, I'm intrigued. This is a small ticket item, but I'm intrigued by the 2 larger scenarios you take away the Greenway connections and partnerships, which is 3 million. But yet they're larger bond scenarios. What was the thinking behind that? Does that question make sense?
Okay, Councilmember, now let me just go and understand. You're asking why the scenario 2 and 3 has some of the Greenway connections not included?
So in scenario 1, you have a middle under connectivity and access, the first category. The second bullet or line is Greenway connections and partnerships at $3 million. This is under scenario 1. You see that? Am I missing something? Am I looking?
Okay, yes,
It's
I see
on
that.
12. It's the panel 12 of your PowerPoint.
Yes, okay. On that, we just wanted to, provide you some additional options, and so it's, basically it can be interchangeable. You can always add that to some other options that you would see fit into various scenarios. So it was just a choice of options to give you those to look at.
Okay, I guess my point is the two larger bond scenarios, putting more money overall in the bond, you reduced connectivity and access.
Correct.
Which I'm just intrigued by why y'all chose to do that.
Well, that gave us the opportunity to add some larger projects, some new development projects, and so that just kind of gave us the leverage to be able to add those additional projects such as Devereaux, Sertoma, and either Method or Tarboro. It gave us a capacity to add those in.
And again, I can't do the math that quick, but it was only 3 million, and it seems to me that I'd like to see that stay in there in the larger scenarios personally. So it's such a small amount, and it doesn't. I think there's a way to work with these other projects to reduce by 100,000 here, 100,000 there. If that's what you have to do to get it down to bring that back in. So anyway, that's my thought and recommendation on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
What I'm going to suggest is we not give specific feedback today, because what I want us to do is all really sit down and absorb this. And we need to have a follow-up session where we have that type of interaction, where we're giving specific feedback. I think this is more for us to absorb based on what you heard from the retreat. And I know I need more time, a lot more time, to look this over and just kind of be able to see what the unintended consequences are, and also just the geographic diversity. And I saw Councilor Melton with his hand up previously, and then Councilor Cox. Councilor Melton, are you circling out on us there?
Mayor, he seems to, maybe his connection has gone bad, so maybe wait on him.
Okay, Councilmember Cox. Oh, here he is back. Are you back with us, Councilmember Melton?
I am, and you answered my question, which was, are you asking for our specific feedback in this moment, or will we have another opportunity? So I will save my thoughts and comments for our subsequent opportunity, but I would like to echo what I believe Mayor Pro Tem Stewart and I said at the retreat, which is go big or go home. And so that's, I remain in that camp.
Councilmember Cox?
Yeah, I'll just say generally, I'm still not seeing support for park needs in District B. I have a lot of specifics. I've mentioned them in the past. I'm still not seeing it, and I don't see me supporting the options as they've been presented. So yes, we need more discussion, and I'm really disappointed in what I'm seeing.
Well, thank you, Oscar, for pulling all of this information together. It's a lot to think about, and there are a lot of consequences. I think that we all need time to kind of absorb this, and as I said, and then come back and have an additional discussion. There's implications related to the penny for parks, and just how that will impact the bond or not impact the bond, but also impact our ability to get this important maintenance done. We've seen the discussion on air conditioning now for how many years? I'm not sure. So I think that we want to have that commitment to maintaining what we currently own and having, well, it's important. I actually have a question for Michael Moore.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar.
Hello.
Michael, where, I mean, we're talking about $12 million needed. Where, what's the solution? This reminds me of what happened with water and sewer, like whatever it was, maybe 8 years ago, where I was kind of stunned at the backlog on maintenance, whatnot. What kind of solutions do you see moving forward?
Madam Mayor, I think one of the solutions that I alluded to is that we have moved more to an asset management-based program. So this represents kind of where we are at this point in time today. Were we to have additional resources over the next, say, 5 to 10 years, we should potentially be able to move a little bit of that into more of that pavement preservation that we've got. The other, in terms of sidewalks, that is a little bit more difficult nut to crack. But again, that's one where knowing what we have and what condition it is today and being able to target resources in the most important places, I think would be also useful. In terms of where additional resources come from, I may have to defer to Mary Vigue on that. I'm really good at spending money. I'm not so good at making money. So let me, if you don't mind, Mary, I'll defer to you on that a little. So.
Everybody needs to know their skill set. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. So historically, the CIP funded through the general fund some of this maintenance. As you recall, several years ago, Council did approve the penny for resurfacing that we still are dedicated to every year. Last year, when COVID hit, part of the reduction in the overall budget was a reduction to the capital improvement program. So we reduced the general fund contribution by $13 million. And that really hits these areas. So what Michael Moore is talking about in terms of what is funded and not funded, and Billy Jackson, that's an ongoing conversation we have every year through the budget process and the CIP development. So it's really about what additional resources are available in terms of the general fund contribution. And then what do we have? Like, for example, last year we could shore up resurfacing and some other projects through 2/3 bonds. So when that's available, we utilize that resource. This year in the 22 process, we have been unable to restore the general fund transfer, that $13 million. We did remain dedicated to the penny for resurfacing and for housing in the capital improvement program from the general fund. But through some work with finance, we were able to find some additional resources for some smaller projects. But there is no dedicated revenue stream for these overall maintenance projects associated with transportation and general capital maintenance. So other than the penny for resurfacing, it's really about what the general fund in that given year is able to contribute. I don't know if that answers your question, Mayor.
So, Mary, part of what happened with the paving was a result of the recession. Great Recession, 2008, 9, 10, 11, whatnot. And that's when we raised the tax did a tax increase dedicated 1 cent for paving. Is that the only type of solution we have to address some of these issues?
Your budget director never wants to stand in front of you and tell you to raise taxes. But in terms of a true long-term solution to the city's overall maintenance needs, yes, I think some sort of dedicated revenue source would be beneficial. It would give us a ongoing understanding of what that amount is to be budgeted every year in the CIP, and it would be reliable, much like the current resurfacing and housing penny. When COVID hit last year and we did have to move other things around because of council's commitment in those areas and because of that dedicated revenue stream, we were able to maintain that maintenance and, for example, affordable housing. And so, I'm not advocating that we raise taxes, but I think in terms of long-term planning, that's an area we really do need to focus on.
Let me ask a follow-up question then. We will have stimulus funding coming from the federal government in part to help us deal with COVID-related issues that have occurred. And I know I've seen some of what we can spend that on: small business. I believe water and sewer might be in there, utilities, broadband. There's a list of there's a list. Is there any way possible that some of this funding could be used to offset some of these costs? So you're making some trades within the budget?
I don't want to say no right off the bat because I'm not sure, but we did see, as far as infrastructure at this moment, we've seen is water, sewer, and broadband. So right now it hasn't listed things like roadways or transportation infrastructure. We're still waiting on our guidance from the federal government. And so as we get that over the next few weeks, we'll have a better idea of what specifically we can use. But upon initial look, the infrastructure that was listed was more specific than those.
Okay, then we also have the infrastructure plan that we'll see what Washington decides to do with that, but that could offer some solutions as well. Okay, thank you. And I know that I didn't ask you to advocate. I just asked for an honest answer, and I appreciate providing that honest answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Branch.
Yes, I was wondering, with the information we've received today, and I know in the parks presentation, they gave us kind of a scale of what impact would be if we were to raise. Could we see, in totality at a future meeting or at a manager's update, what the totality of increase would be based upon the numbers we were given today? And worst case scenario, what it would be based on worst case scenario?
So the worst case, let me just get this, Councilor Branch, not worst case, but if we were to say do a penny for parks.
Right.
What would that impact be? And if we had to do a penny for capital improvements as well,
right,
what would those two be? That's what you're asking.
Yeah, and then I think there was roads. I think there was two separate ones. So if we could just see what that impact would be, it would be helpful.
Okay. Does Mary have that?
I do, Mayor. I will say that one option that council may want to consider as you think about this is, if you don't want to add up all the pennies, is dedicate a specific penny to ongoing maintenance associated with overall city maintenance. And so what would that do is that would enable us to address in any given year parks, roadway, and building maintenance. And in addition, it would not require additional staff capacity. So if you added, let's say, 3 cents for overall maintenance, much to Parks' point, we are limited by staff resources. There's also, to spend that amount of money in a given year is a lot. However, a dedicated penny for overall maintenance would allow us to, in certain years, focus on additional resurfacing, or in certain years to focus on greenway lighting or those needs that have been identified, and actually see quicker results if there wasn't an interest in doing a larger tax rate. But to answer your question, Councilmember Branch, we will definitely bring back the tax implication for multiple options. But that is also another choice that council could consider, which is an overall maintenance penny.
Thank you, because I hadn't thought about that. That's why we have you right where you are. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So that, yes, okay, that's a good explanation. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, this is a lot to absorb. So I want everybody to really, you know, kind of dig deep. And if you have questions, ask staff. Set up some individual time with them to follow up and get your questions answered. Marshall, I don't know what the schedule is like for our work sessions, but we are not in a rush on this. I'd rather get it right than rush forward. With the election delay, obviously, we don't have the same schedule we're on before. So I'll get with you and we can talk about what's upcoming. And then in the meantime, we have some of staff's recommendations, and I'm sure that that will fluctuate. We will also at some point have to get with the Chamber of Commerce to continue discussion with them about their leading an effort for a parks bond. They usually run that campaign for us, so they were committed to doing that. We'll just have to re-up the conversation with them and see where we are. So with that said, if there are no more questions, thank you everyone for being here. And thank you staff for that work. Lot was put into that and we appreciate it. So thank you. So I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you everyone for being here today.